gimpy if you haven't noticed. I'm not going to talk about that in a minute. Called to be, right? So, you know, Ken and I both have a theater background. This is a point where Ken and I share a commonality. And my background in theater tends to run towards more the classical theater, and his, of course, runs towards musicals. So with him, you get Hamilton, and with me, you get Shakespeare. I honestly had a moment after Hamilton last week, and I thought, how does anybody follow that? Like, wow. And I thought, you know, I'm just going to show up. And the question that kept showing up for me was this question of to be or not to be. And Hamlet, very famously, continues on in his soliloquy. And he says, whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. And he goes on to talk about to sleep, perchance to dream, and he is trying to decide whether or not he should live or die, to be or not to be. And he is very, very focused on the mind, whether it is nobler in the mind. Because Hamlet's biggest issue is that he cannot make a decision. He cannot make a decision. Soliloquy after soliloquy after soliloquy is Hamlet trying to make a decision. He runs it over and over and over in his mind. Over and over and over in his mind. Over and over and over in his mind. He's literally standing over his uncle, who killed his father and then married his mother. Shakespeare, right? It's very soap opera. And he's standing over his uncle after he knows that his uncle has done this. And his uncle is in prayer. He's got a clean shot. I mean, his whole goal has been revenge through this entire 4.5-hour play. And he has got a clean shot to actually just kill him right there and then. And the mind kicks in. Oh, he's praying. So if he's praying, it means his sins have been are not present. And if I kill him right now, he's going to go to heaven. So I can't do it now. And he waits. Again, all that indecision. Now, when we are standing in the choice of whether or not we are going to be or to not be, in Unity, we're talking about this not in the big death way, though we are talking about it in the big death way, because there is only one thing happening. But we're talking about it in terms of our transformation. In terms of our willingness to step out into something else that is calling us. That which is calling us to be. Really be. This was me not being. Really, it was me not being. I was in doing mode. I was not paying attention. I walked back and forth across a computer cable at least 6 times with no problem whatsoever. And on the 7th time, I went down. And I went down, like seriously down. And all I can say is I am grateful because that it's a sprain. Like I'm grateful, really am. But I was not being. I was not awake and aware and truly present to what was actually happening in the room, in real time, in real space. I checked out. I was somewhere else. Can anybody in here relate to that experience? Can anybody in here relate to the mind taking over? I don't know, should I do this or should I do that? Well, if I do this, then that means X, Y, Z. But I could do that, and that means A, B, C. But maybe if I did this thing, that would mean JKL. Oh, wow, what am I going to do? And this to be or not to be, when we're talking about spiritual principles, we're talking about our willingness to really show up in the uncomfortable spaces. to really show up with what's actually happening in our heart. As Robert beautifully demonstrated a moment of being and not being when he was up here doing the announcements. And he said, oh, look at me. He caught himself. Did you catch him catching himself? He caught himself. That's because Robert has a spiritual practice. Robert is engaged with that piece. So we're all going to try to check out, folks. We're all going to do that. We're all going to want to do that. The question you have to keep coming back to be or not to be. I get to not be present. I get to make that choice. But what happens for Hamlet, I think, is a warning for all of us. Because he's not taking action, because he's not actually engaging in the beingness of what is actually happening for him, he gets really stressed out. Can anybody relate to that? His anxiety is up, his stress is up, he is just spinning his wheels because he can't move forward. And yet he knows that there is something calling him to be. And what ends up happening is he starts to make really reckless choices. Can anybody relate to that? We overthink it to death. It's like, oh, I got this, 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 I got this. Oh, no, I'm just going to do this. And we're not actually really listening to the wisdom that we are. We are so caught in our mental gyrations that we are cut off from the truth of who we are. Because in every moment we are invited to choose. Every moment is a choice. Every moment you get to decide, am I present? Am I not present? Am I here? Am I not here? Am I in my head? Am I in my own life? Am I in my own story? Or am I actually going to choose to be here right now? And let me be perfectly clear. Not making a choice is a choice. That is a choice. So this is the one that we fall into the most. The beingness versus the doingness. And in the doingness, we are given an opportunity to kind of check out. We're so focused on what's coming down the line. We're so focused on what's in the future. Our focus is always on what is over there, that we're not paying attention to what's right now in front of us. And see that little speedy little doingness? That is how I sprained my wrist. That was me. Speedy, moving forward without truly being present. So another way for us to think about to be or not to be is mindful or mindful. Which one are you living in? Now, Unity talks a lot about the mind and the power of the mind and the power of our thoughts. And I really want to clarify that when we're speaking about this, we're not just talking about our mind, because if we let our mind do all the work, whoo, we end up like Hamlet. He's dead at the end, folks, and everybody around him is dead too. It's really not how we want to go. All right? The invitation when we are talking about mind, because the studies now, science has caught up, right? Charles Fillmore was writing in a time when science was not what science is now. And so science has caught up, and we know that they used to think that the mind controlled the emotional system. They thought the mind was the center of it all. And what they have learned in studies is actually that the heart can also generate something. It can start from the heart, and then you have a thought. It doesn't work that you have a thought. It doesn't have to work that you have a thought and it goes to your beingness. And when we say mind, we're going to expand this even more. When we say mind, and we're talking about the brain, and we're talking about our neuroscience, every single inch of your body is part of your mind. You have neurotransmitters and nerve endings running all the way down your back, running everywhere through your body. And that is your mind. How aware of it are you? How present to it are you, really? Are you mindful or are you mindful? So Hamlet says or take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. So he's talking about the struggles of the mind, the struggles that we get caught in, the way that we create our own suffering. We were talking about this in the Absolute Abundance class, and this idea that pain is here, but suffering is optional. So our arms against a sea of trouble, our arms against that suffering, our arms against all the ways that we spin out and allow ourselves to lose the centeredness of who we actually are our spiritual practices. They call us home. They remind us who and what we truly are. And in each of us, this is what we're shooting for, because you can't just be, or you'll just be sitting on a cushion all day long and you'll starve to death. And we do need the doing, but what we want is that, I love my little Venn diagram, we want that little sweet spot where the doingness is arising from the beingness, and the beingness is arising from the doingness, because they're all one thing. So my question for you is, who have you come here to be? What's calling you to be? And I want to do a really short exercise. So if you pull out your programs, there's room on the back for you to take some notes. And I just want to do a really short little exercise. Something I do in my shadow, with my shadow class. So if you took the class with me, this might be familiar. But we're just going to take a moment, and once you get, everybody got your programs and a little pen? They're on the front of the chairs. And I just want you to take a moment and close your eyes and open your heart. And I want you to think about somebody that you admire. Somebody who you admire. It could be somebody that you actually know personally, or it could be someone out in the world doing things that stir you, that attract you, that lighten you, that inspire you. Who, and I want you to see that person that you admire. And I want you to think about, what are 3 qualities that they have that you think are just awesome? 3 things that they are in the world. And I want you to write them down, what those 3 things are. Maybe they're compassionate, maybe they're loving, maybe they're inspiring, maybe they're authentic, whatever it is that allows you to feel that there's something about them that you admire. And now I want you to think of another person who you admire. Another person. Maybe this is a person that's in your life. Somebody who's actually in your world, who you interact with. What is it about them that you admire? And just write down 3 things that you admire about them. So you're going to end up with a total of 6 things. And now I want you to pick 3 of those that are yours, that you are called to be. What are the 3 that just speak to you? That are the thing that you want to own? The thing that you are saying yes to inviting into your beingness? Who have you come here to be? How does that feel? How do those qualities feel as you? Maybe a little scary? Right? Maybe a little like, oh boy, I'm going to have to show up in a whole new way. Maybe a little like, oh, phew, relief. Like, oh, yeah, okay. That's me. I'm going to claim that. So the invitation is to be with whatever's coming up for you around that. You are attracted to those people, the admiration that you have for those aspects and those other people. We know that there is no other. There is only one activity happening. So what you're seeing out there as them is actually what you, it's reflection of you. So the invitation is to own it. The invitation is to claim it. The invitation is to activate it. The doingness is grounded in who you have come here to be. And when you forget who you have come here to be, and you want to kill somebody because they are just making you so angry, we take a breath and we remember who we came here to be. So I have some up here on my slide, but we are infinite. So you just kind of isolated 3 of them. You should see my I have come here to be list. It just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing. Every time somebody annoys me and I have to figure out how I could show up to meet that, that's another thing I have come here to be. More love, more patience, more compassion, more open-heartedness, more forgiveness, more light, more love. So who have you come here to be? Because we are our choices. This is truth. We are our choices. And the invitation from Unity is always to choose from the highest and the best. To choose from the thing that is the most divine awareness that you have of yourself. And when we choose from there, we don't end up doing things like this to ourselves. It's not that something like this might not happen to me, but I was asleep at the wheel. And I own that I was asleep at the wheel. So, to be or not to be, what are you going to choose? I invite you to choose beingness. Because truly, it is so much easier. Really, it is so much easier than all of that suffering and all of that strife. Find that sweet spot. That sweet spot in the being and the doing. Use your spiritual practices. Come here even on days like this, when travel is a little more challenging. It's a perfect opportunity to practice that we are here to be. So what are some of the things you guys are here to be? Patient. Forgiving. Forgiving. How many people had forgiving on there? I did.
Self-loving.
Self-loving. That's a great one.
More self-loving.
More self-loving. Yeah.
Organized.
Organized. I love that. I have come here to be organized. That's awesome, Ellen. What else?
Compassion.
Risk take. I have come here to be a risk taker. Ooh, we like that one, right? What else?
Compassion.
I have come here to be having 5 years, so I can hear all of that at the same time.
Accepting.
Accepting.
Generous.
Generous.
Authentic.
Authentic.
Connected.
Connect. Ooh, these are great.
Kind.
Kind.
Compassion.
Compassionate.
Bold.
Oh, yeah. How about adventurous?
Creative.
Yeah, adventurous. Creative.
Yeah.
Is that yours, Kate?
Yes, it is.
Adventurous.
Funny.
What?
Funny.
Funny. I love that. I've come here to be funny. Alan.
Competition.
Franchise on it.
So my invitation to you is take these qualities, what it is that speaks to you, and look at how you can actually apply them in your day. And at the end of your day, literally at the end of your day, take stock. How funny was I today? How organized was I today? Not as a way of beating yourself up. This isn't about like, I'm another way to like make ourselves miserable and suffer and lash ourselves. Oh, I wasn't very funny today at all. It's an invitation to be present to who and what you're actually showing up as. Because if it's just living in your head, it is not actually in time and in space. We have to actually activate it. So let's take this into our time of meditation, the invitation to continue to listen to what we are called
to become, to be.